Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is as you're watching this. Today, I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite topics in all of psychology and even neuroscience, as we will talk about in a little bit. This is the relationship between emotions and reason. Now, for various reasons, a lot of us think of these two things as completely separate and unrelated. While it is true that yes, sometimes very powerful emotions can cloud our reason and logical thinking, but sometimes thinking too logically about things can blind us to the emotional significance of various things. But for the most part, these both emotion and logical reasoning are inextricably linked. And one of the best ways to demonstrate this is through a particularly interesting case study in neuroscience, and this is the case of SM. Now, SM led a fairly normal life up until she was about her teens, early 20s, and essentially she had a genetic condition, an extremely rare genetic condition that essentially destroyed both of her amygdalae. Now, the amygdalae are two little almond-sized organelles in your brain, one for each hemisphere, as is the case for most things in your brain. And essentially, their biggest function is dealing with emotion and helping you process emotion. But more specifically, the amygdalae deal uh, very heavily with fear and your fear response. They are largely responsible for your fear response. And so the interesting thing with SM was that both of her amygdalae were destroyed, and yet her entire limbic system remained intact, which resulted in a very interesting phenomena where she was essentially incapable of feeling afraid of anything, and the things she used to be scared of were now simply morbidly fascinating. To demonstrate this, essentially, two researchers took her to an exotic pet museum that sold snakes, which SM used to report hating. But when they got to the exotic pet museum, and SM was fully expecting to just hate and be afraid of these snakes, what she found instead was that she actually couldn't get enough of them. And if you don't think that this is hilarious, then you are clearly not picturing this right. So let me help you a bit and demonstrate what this actually looked like. Hey, SM, could you do us a massive favor, for the sake of all of science and humanity? Sure. What do you need me to do? We just need you to hold this, thing that is totally 100% snake and not a crappy prop made of tape. Um, but why? I hate snakes. We want to see what happens. We're curious, and science is important. So just kind of hold the snake for us. Oh, okay. If you insist. What 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 are you doing? This is so cool. What is this? You're going to kill that snake. Please stop. No, what? I just it's so ow. It bit me. Yeah, it's a snake. They do that when you rub them and squeeze them. Huh, fascinating. Do you have any venomous ones on hand? What? Obviously, I'm exaggerating for comedic effect, but she did become extremely morbidly curious about this snake, and essentially she abandoned just all sense of logic and reason. Instead of feeling afraid, she got really involved with the snakes. Like, she was practically yanking them out of the handler's hands. She wanted to feel them, touch them, look at them, to listen to them. She didn't mind when they bit her, and that last bit about her asking about whether or not she could see any of the more venomous ones was not an exaggeration. She legitimately asked this. She was this fascinated by the snake. And this brings us full circle to the point about emotion and logical reasoning, because many people would argue that SM did not act with logical reasoning in this scenario. And this is entirely because she couldn't feel fear in this scenario. And fear is what allows for logical reasoning in this scenario to take place, or at least it provides the motivation for logical reasoning. We use our emotions and our emotional cues to things and our emotional reactions to things as guides for how we should act, which works very well until we don't have access to those emotions anymore. We can see how this kind of emotional reasoning plays out in politics too. It was very present in the experiment I ran with my mom, my stepmom, and my sister. Unfortunately, I recorded my sessions with all of them, but the one with my sister got erased. So unfortunately, I only have the session I did with my mom and stepmom. But even then, I feel like those actually demonstrate my point very well. Do ignore the fact that I now have a different shirt and my hair might be slightly longer and in a different style. After all, time is only an artificial construct. Anyways, I did not realize how long this video already was, so I'm only going to show a very small part of the recording I made of the experiment that I ran with my family. It might actually be a good thing that I lost the footage with my sister, because this video is already twice as long as it was supposed to be, so, yeah, sorry, Dr. Bond. So instead, I'm only going to show you this one specific part that I feel really encapsulates the point I want to make about affect, emotion, and reason. And it is this reaction that my parents had to former Vice President Mike Pence. Mike Pence.
Weak. She has stronger words.
Dickhead.
All right, and explain why.
He's like a friggin' white supremacy poster boy. I swear to you, just look at the man. Then you pair what comes out of his fucking mouth and what he believes in.
His stance on the LGBT community is truly just fucking sickening.
Atrocious. Now, what I find particularly interesting about this is when she mentions Mike Pence's stance on the LGBTQ community, because what this signals to me is that their emotional response to Mike Pence is not merely an emotional response. It is an emotional response, but it is one that legitimately reflects their values and beliefs, and helps them make decisions based on those values and beliefs. Which I think is really important. In a way, it signals that our emotions are how we stay true to ourselves and how we really feel and what we really believe. And I feel like this goes far beyond just the relationship between emotion and reason. It's the relationship between our emotions, how we feel about things, the way we think about things, and just our very existence as a human being on this planet. It also shows that emotional reactions are extremely important to our voting behavior and and the way we conduct political discourse. And I think this is important to point out because a lot of people feel like emotions are part of the problem. They're not, but our refusal to supplement those emotions with, some form of logical understanding and empathizing and relating to other people. And I think that this is something important for us to all realize. We need both emotions and logical reasoning, and we need to use them together. We cannot have one without the other. We need to use them together to make rational decisions about how to move forward as a society. And at this point, you're probably wondering, why did you use an example of snakes before you brought up politics? Are you comparing politicians to snakes? And the answer is absolutely not, because that would be an insult to snakes. Thank you for watching.